Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Trumpeter Fulmar project. This episode is going to just deal with the cockpit, in fact both cockpits, and as you can see I'm starting off with the seats. So these are photo etch seats from Eduard and they're really nice. Just care when folding them up, as with all photo etch seats, and I'm using the Tamiya folding bending device, for want of a better word. This will all get glued up together with just some super glue. I've tried soldering before, but yeah, it didn't really work for me. So I just stick with the glue, and it worked very well in this case. And it's a massive improvement over the kit seat. You can see how fine the brass is. This is the pilot's cockpit, and as you can see I've added some brass and I've drilled out the there's a big hole just where the seat mounts. That's for the depression that's in the bucket of the seat. And what I'm doing now is, just with my weld stick, I'm just opening up a slot, and this is for the missing, there's some kind of lever there, I don't know what it's for, maybe it's seat adjust or something. Once I finish with the drill, I can go in and tidy things up with a knife. And I'm going to make this slightly bigger than I need, and then cut out, using the portrait cutter, a cover for it, as you can see there. And there's the lever in place, and it actually moves. Happy accident. You can see I've just built the structure underneath just to house it. This is the left cockpit sidewall. Now in the kit, it's really rubbish actually. The left sidewall, it's really flat looking, so it does need sorting. So I've made a new left sidewall from scratch out of plastic card. You can see various other bits of card and rod. And then these photo etch bits are from the Eduard set. The throttle quadrant, that's modified from an old Eduard Spitfire. And you can see how 3D that looks. The other one was just flat as a pancake. Now the instrument panel's really nice as moulded in the kit. It's yeah, they've done a fabulous job. But I've got one of these 3D things, so I shall be using that. It's just prepped. This is the right hand console, and you can see all the added bits I've done. I don't know what those brass circles are for, but they're there on the real thing, and this extra lever going in. Okay, the observer's rear cockpit then. So I've removed the floor and I've scratch built this lower structure, and the piece of plastic card on the top there is just covering up the holes. Going in with a riveting tool just to add that little bit of extra. First pass was a sighting pass. I can go in and actually add the rivets. So Trumpeter have moulded the observer's floor completely wrong, so I removed it and I've scratch built that lower structure to lower it down and build a pedestal. So the observer seat actually swivels. In the kit they'd have you mount the seat on the floor and a hole for his legs, so obviously that's not right. What I'm doing now here is just building the mount for the observer's plotting board. Just some very fine rod. was fiddly. And actually, none of it can be seen because I'm going to cover that up with the plotting board itself. It's just some stretched sprue. I just imagine the whole thing probably collapses down flat. And that'll be trimmed in a second. Trying to keep it all square was a bit of a nightmare. Now they are pretty much complete. You can see the modifications I've done to the back wall as well. The photo etch mounts for the radio kit and that structure lowering the floor. Front cockpit pretty much complete. So here is the floor, and you can see the seat mount, and that will allow the seat to swivel. And I'll paint that first before gluing it, but I'm just having a little bit of a sight to see how it's going to look. And there is the completed parts, really. Just the basic reconstruction done. So this stuff is great. It's metal prep from VMS, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to brush it on all the metal parts and the brass parts. This will etch into the metal, and it's a really good primer. I have sprayed it, but it did go on a bit thick and left a texture, so now I just brush paint it. I find that gives a superior result. All the brass parts were sanded whilst still on the fret, so that's going to give a bit of an extra key anyway. And now I can go in with the primer, it's Mr. Surfacer Primer. And with all these different materials, such as brass, the kit plastic card, wire, plastic rod, it's a really good idea to prime. Not only does it sort of etch into it and help with paint adhesion, but it will just unify all the underlying colours and parts and everything. It's going to make your base coat a lot more easier to apply and a lot more solid. Now we can put some colour in, and this is MRP Interior Green, just building it with light coats. It's a really nice shade, and it goes down very smooth and shiny, and being a lacquer, it's really hard wearing. This is the left-hand cockpit sidewall. I'm just spraying the back because it is thin plastic card. It will help with the opacity. Come on, Jamie, keep it in shot. There we are. You can see that the throttle is separate. I'm going to paint that. That will be black and that will be separate. So this is the extra bit underneath. And just doing it from all angles just to make sure. Although actually when it's in there, you can't see too much because I ended up doing the canopy closed. So I decided to spray some of the black boxes on the sidewalls, so that was a lot of masking, but I just think it's worth it. For me, it gives a neater result. I'm not very good at accurate brush painting, not with my eyes. Some places I did need to do the brush painting though. That was mostly sprayed. And then going in with, this is Atom paint from Ammo of MIG, and it is a lighter shade, so that was quite handy because it meant I could use it just to pick out some of the highlights. Really, I should have done this after the wash, but yeah, it's good to do it both times, I think, before the wash and after the wash. Right, this stuff is great, the dry brush paint, and I've got this special dry brush. This is the leather backrest, so it was painted in black first, and then just by dry brushing with this leather brown colour, it gives that kind of nice aged, worn leather look. So that worked well. That was a nice experiment. Now for some detail chipping. So I've done some brush chipping. Sorry, this is brush chipping, isn't it? What am I talking about? I've done some sponge chipping, and now I'm just going in, backing it up with a brush. So obviously quite a bit of wear around the rudder pedals. A lot of scuffing from the pilot's feet. It's quite dilute paint, keep it nice and thin. And just doing this sort of tapping motion helps to keep it all sort of random and looking authentic. The seatbelts have been painted in a buff colour. Now with these Sutton harnesses, you have all these kind of holes and pins and straps, and rather than trying to paint them, I thought I'll just scrape the paint away to leave the sort of brass showing through, and that worked well. It's nice and neat. So here's the 3D decal, and you don't need to soak them. Literally just a drop on the back. Spread it around with the tweezers. And then by the time you turn it round, they've released and you can move them. So it really is a few seconds, so you don't need to dip them in. And if you do this, it will help to avoid them sort of curling or anything like that, because you want to keep them flat. A little bit of MIG Ammo Ultra Glue, which is perfect for this. And then you just pick them up and stick them on. And you can see how quick and easy it all is. So this layered bit going on. Better than 3D photo etch, I think. Better than a kit decal. Even though the instrument panel was really nicely moulded, actually, they did a really good job. But I think that's just brilliant. One of the radio boxes, and then it's just a question of gluing all these bits on. So used a mix of the 3D decal and the Eduard photo etch. You'll see this is a bit of Eduard going down, kind of instrument thing on the right. For the oxygen bottles and the fire extinguishers, I did use some metal tape, self-adhesive metal tape, again from Ammo of MIG. And on these, I'm assuming the oxygen bottles, the black ones, I just did the front ones. So that fire extinguisher you can see there, I ended up losing that, which is a shame because it was scratch built. And I was pleased with how it turned out. Just replacing the wiring there behind the pilot seat. Doesn't have to be too neat because the real thing wasn't too neat either. Now to add some depth. So this is an oil wash made from Starship Filth from Ammo. It's from the oil brusher, and it's the perfect tone for this. It's a grey-green itself. This layer, it'll add some depth and also add a bit of grime. And then when it's dry, you can just go in with the cotton bud and just give it a rub, take away the excess. So you can see on the back there it wasn't quite dry, so I left that alone and then came back again when it was dry. So this gets most of it up actually, but you can go in with a brush where you need it. So I did that here, just going in with a clean brush with a bit of thinner and just tidying things up a bit. Now it's time to put everything together. So here's the sort of main radio thing in the back. This is the oxygen hose. So this was flexible resin from MDC. Absolutely brilliant stuff. Just added a like a little bit of tubing on the end, brass tubing for the connector. That goes through the hole there. I did the mounting brackets as well. You see how nice that looks. And there we are, that's all the major components ready to be put together. You see the observer's oxygen hose there, just sitting on top of the radio. The front bits. And the back bits. Time to fit it all together now. And the fit is really nice and accurate. Just going with a little bit of glue just to hold it all in place. And when I was building it, I was test fitting all the time, because the last thing we want to do is spend hours and hours scratch building and detailing and then find out it doesn't fit. So yeah, really important just to test fit as you go along, and then by the time you come to put it all together, you shouldn't have any problems. Yep, just lifting there at the front bulkhead. So just going in there again and holding it with a bit of pressure. Pilot's bulkhead going in. That just slots in quite neatly, and that will act as a key for the sidewalls, the left and right sidewalls. Control column going in, and I did add a little bit of wire to that as well, just to dress things up. And the sidewalls going in. And it goes without saying really that when you're doing all this detail work, references is key, just to try and keep things as close to the real thing as possible. You do have to make some compromises somewhere, but yeah, reference really important. So adding the seat, just gluing it in from behind as well, just backing it up with a little bit more super glue. You can see the big hole there, and just the depression of the seat that I've made in the brass sits in there quite nicely. So the plastic card was thinner than the kit part, so I just had to make sure I'm manipulating it into the right way, just making sure it's not too far in, otherwise I'll end up with a gap when I put it into the fuselage, and we can't have that. The instrument panel was just tacked into place with a bit of super glue. And there we are, just a few pegs just to hold it into the fuselage half. And you can see how busy that observer cockpit looks. really detailed. Really pleased with how that turned out. And I'm just pointing out here the tweezers. I've just gone in with a bit of 5-minute epoxy, just to back things up, just to hold it all in place and make it really rigid. And that is it. That is end of part 2. In part 3, I'm going to be doing the construction, putting the airframe together. You can see how I massacred the canopy in order to make it fit in the open position. Get out the wow stick again for some added detail. Just a bit of drilling there for some parts that I'm going to scratch build. This wow stick's brilliant. And the main event, putting the wings into the fuselage. As you can see, it's quite a nice fit. So join me then. I'll see you in part 3. Thanks very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.